February 1895. Alfred Dreyfus had been arrested for treason and sent to Devil's Island to rot, based on falsified testimony on flimsy handwriting evidence. In the summer, a whisper reached Paris. Counterintelligence believed that secrets were still being sent to Germany, even though Dreyfus was already rotting on Devil's Island. If Dreyfus was innocent, then someone else was guilty, and that someone was still out there. Then they find the telegram. The telegram that named the real traitor. By this time, Emile Zola was already a very famous novelist. As the situation unfolded with Dreyfus and new evidence came to light, Zola reached his limit of what he could morally tolerate from the lying establishment, and he was about to do something simple and dangerous. Tell the truth publicly in a country that did not want to hear it. This is Metro Stop Podcast. Avenue Emile Zola is a station on Line 10 in the 15th arrondissement. The station was opened on the 13th of July 1913 and named after the writer in 1937 after some metro extensions. The 15th arrondissement is in the southwest of the city and is the third largest district. Emile Zola is the defining French novelist of the late 19th century, a fierce public intellectual whose literary experiments, artistic friendships, and political courage shaped modern France. He was born in Paris in 1840, but raised in Aix-en-Provence, where he befriended Paul Cézanne, later introducing him to Manet and the other Impressionists. When his father died in 1847, his family endured abject poverty. He famously survived by trapping and eating sparrows outside of his attic window. These early struggles sharpened his sensitivity to social justice and the lives of the working poor. In 1862, he was hired as a clerk at Hachette, the publisher founded in 1826, and then left to pursue writing full-time when his controversial novel, Claude's Confession, met with disapproval from his employers. By the time Dreyfus was arrested, Zola was already famous and already exhausted by the moral cowardice of the establishment, and this is clear when you read most of his famous works, including Thérèse Raquin, which is a psychological and moral study of crime, Nana from 1880, The Rise and Fall of a Courtesan as a Metaphor for a Corrupt Society, Germinal in 1885, his masterpiece on miners, class struggle and industrial capitalism, Les Bêtes Humaines from 1890, Violence and Passions set against the modern railway, then La Débâcle in 1892, about the Franco-Prussian War and the Paris Commune. He also wrote influential essays such as Le Roman Expérimental in 1880, articulating the principles of naturalism. Naturalism, his scientific approach to fiction grounded in hereditary, environment and social forces. His Rougon-Macquart cycle dissected the Second Empire with scientific precision. He believed that fiction could expose truths that polite society preferred to ignore. The monumental 20-novel series traces 3 branches of a single family across the Second Empire, each novel exploring a different social milieu. You have The Kill, which is about Parisian real estate speculation, The Belly of Paris, the central food markets as a microcosm of society. L'Assommoir depicts alcoholism and working life. Lady's Delight is the rise of the department store. And Dr. Pascal, the genealogical and scientific summation of the entire cycle. Zola uses recurring characters, symbolic imagery, and detailed environments to build a panoramic portrait of modernity. But more than that, some of the characters and themes of these novels had prepared Zola to stand up for Dreyfus, perhaps only subconsciously. Then, in 1898, he wrote J'accuse. His explosive open letter defending Alfred Dreyfus and exposing military corruption. So how did we get here? In the 1880s, there was a newspaper called the Libre Parole, or the Free Speech, endorsed by far-right populists. It was founded by a monarchist called Edward Drumont. He used this platform to stoke anti-Semitism on a massive national scale. He wrote about the shadowy Jewish elites who were politically, economically and spiritually strangling France. It jumped on the financial failure of the Panama Canal, and as one of the main financiers was Jewish, and everyone who was associated with him paid some price for it, including Georges Clemenceau. It went on to claim that Jews were inferior and even went so far as to call them a different species. Really hateful stuff, and effectively putting a target on the back of innocent Jews. By 1892, it had become clear that there was a mole in the French artillery, leaking technological secrets to the Germans, though no one could figure out who or how. In May of that year, Drumont published an article confidently placing blame on the Jews, and wrote vicious articles publicly disparaging Jewish in the military. To be completely clear, while Drumont was gaining popularity, he was still a comparatively fringe figure. Mainstream French society remained pretty accepting of Jews, especially in Paris. But, believe it or not, most of the French army was absolutely ready to hear what Drumont was saying. The military of this time was overwhelmingly dominated by religious reactionaries and monarchists who adhered to an unofficial code of honour that had barely changed in 100 years. All in all, France's defeats and humiliations led to an extreme paranoia and hatred of the Republic that was easily influenced by Drumont's vile propaganda. So when counterintelligence found out who the real traitor was, the cover-up deepened. They found a telegram addressed to a German officer, and the handwriting matched that of a man named Major Ferdinand Walson Esterhazy. A man named Major Henry obstructed the counterintelligence by forging another handwritten note to discredit the case against Esterhazy. But the proof had already been sent to Matthew Dreyfus, Alfred's brother. So the military knew that they had to put Esterhazy on trial and release Alfred. But guess what? They didn't do this. They could not admit their mistake that they had wrongfully convicted Alfred Dreyfus. To avoid the embarrassment, they used the forged evidence from Major Henry to uphold the conviction. I'll say it again. The French army knowingly let a traitor go free and kept an innocent man in prison just to save face. Having been let off, Esterhazy fled to London, where he lived for the rest of his life. 3 days after Esterhazy's acquittal, on the 13th of January 1898, Emile Zola published J'accuse, an open letter to President Felix IV, on the front pages of Georges Clemenceau's newspaper L'Aurore. In possibly one of the most famous letters ever written in French history, Zola laid out a full timeline of the affair, the nonsensical case against Dreyfus, the handwriting mismatch, the sham trial and acquittal of Esterhazy, and proof that his guilt had been prejudiced because he was Jewish. The letter is fiery and scathing. Here's a quote. "We are horrified by the terrible light the Dreyfus affair has cast upon it all. This human sacrifice of an unfortunate man. Ah, what a cesspool of folly and foolishness. What preposterous fantasies. What corrupt police tactics. What inquisitorial tyrannical practices. What petty whims of a few higher-ups trampling the nation under their boots, ramming back down their throats the people's cries for truth and justice with the travesty of state security as a pretext." Then he goes on to accuse individuals of deceit, cover-up, fraud, bias and complicity. It's intense. Just as Drumont had spread lies and hate in his publication, La Libre Parole, Zola wanted to counter that and expose the truth and injustice in his. With J'accuse, the Dreyfus affair went international. Zola received thousands of letters from abroad, from people of all ages and backgrounds responding to his open letter. It was very bad news for France. Zola's letter had divided the country into two camps, the Dreyfusard and the anti-Dreyfusard. There was no in between. It sparked riots and violence in some of the bigger cities. It was also very bad news for Zola. After the letter was published, as he predicted, he was accused of libel and he had to flee to London. Emile Zola is now the most famous name associated with the Dreyfus affair. 6 years after J'accuse, Zola is back in Paris. The affair is not over, but the country has changed. The truth is no longer a whisper, it's a political force. The Dreyfusard movement. And Zola, exhausted but unbroken, is finally home. On the night of September 28, 1902, Zola and his wife Alexandrine go to sleep in their Paris apartment. By morning, Zola is dead, poisoned by carbon monoxide from a blocked chimney. Officially, it's ruled an accident. Unofficially, France whispers something darker. Years later, a Parisian stove fitter would confess on his deathbed that he had deliberately sealed Zola's chimney as revenge for J'accuse. Whether true or not, the story captures something essential. Zola died the way he lived, at the centre of France's struggle over truth. His funeral became a national event. Tens of thousands follow his coffin through the streets of Paris. Among them is a young deputy named Jean Jaurès, who delivers one of the most powerful tributes of the day. Zola had fought for justice when it was dangerous. Now, others would have to continue that fight. Zola paid a heavy price for speaking the truth. He was dragged into court, vilified in the press, and finally forced to flee to London. But J'accuse had cracked something open in France. It forced the country to look at itself, at its prejudices, its institutions, and its fear of admitting error. Zola had turned a miscarriage of justice into a national reckoning. And once the truth was out of the bottle, it could not be put back in. But Zola would not fight this battle alone. The affair was no longer just a legal scandal. It had become a test of what the Republic stood for. And inside the Chamber of Deputies, one man was beginning to feel the weight of that test. A man who had not yet chosen a side, but who could no longer ignore what the affair revealed about France. That man was Jean Jaurès. That's next time on Metro Stop Podcast. My main source for the Dreyfus affair was a video by Sam Aronow. Biographies are from Britannica, and I've listed all other sources in the show notes. Music by Alex Productions.